Should I say something outrageous just to go viral? First of all, if it's not related to your product in any way, that's not going to help you if you just say something ridiculous. It also has to be based on something that you believe. Like, it has to be sort of true, or you can't maintain that facade for very long.
Simplicity works best, in my opinion. Same format each time means that when people are scrolling through their feed, they're going to tune back in. They're going to go, oh, I know this person, I know this brand. Whereas if it's a different design, if it's a different color, it's not as recognizable. People are more likely to scroll past.
One of my clients, I was like, send me some selfies. I'm going to help you figure out what selfies you can use to make your content get, and they just had such a hard time with understanding like what kind of selfies to take. So I created a carousel of how to create selfies for LinkedIn. It was very helpful to my clients, but also I just let me just share this carousel on LinkedIn, and it performed really well. So like those things that really come as questions that you might not have even thought is relevant, pay attention to those. Hi, Amy. Thank you so much for joining me.
This is actually my first podcast I've ever done. So thank you for having me.
Ooh, well, I'm excited to be the first one. Well, the reason I invited you to chat with me is I really want to understand carousels better. Okay, so this is one of the most saved content types on LinkedIn. Everyone's promising tools to do it better. The tools don't work, at least not the ones I've tried don't work that well. I think because it's a more complicated format to do, but you do them really well. And I'm really excited to hear from you. By the way, if you don't know Amy, she's a B2B social strategist and content creator. Check her out on LinkedIn. I'll definitely link your link below. But really, I want to understand how it seems like you have fun with it. I mean, it's in your tagline, B2B brands don't have to be boring, right? But let's just spend this, 45 minutes to an hour and just go deep in what makes a good carousel. Let's see some examples, and hopefully folks will get a really good idea on how they can spend the time on creating them, but also get the results that you're hoping for. So
amazing.
Let's dive in. As I mentioned, your tagline, it's a good one. It says B2B marketing, but make it fun. So why do you say that? I guess tell me more.
I think B2B has this reputation now for being B2 boring to boring. And I think where it stems from is that usually B2B marketers have a tendency to take themselves very seriously. I think, because we're selling to businesses, brands kind of assume that they have to be quote unquote professional, whatever that really means. And also always perfect, always the most polished version of themselves. They can't show any flaws, they can't show a crack in the armor. It has to be very solid across the board. But the thing is, we're not talking to faceless entities, we're still selling to people. They just work for companies. So all of the things that make good content, all the criteria for effective, impactful, memorable content still applies. Just because you're talking to someone who is at work rather than in their personal life scrolling on their phone on the sofa at 9 o'clock in the evening, the content that's going to grab their attention, it's still the same. You still have to apply those same principles. It's just in a slightly different context and slightly different topics and nuances, So I think a lot of B2B marketers lose sight of that. And it's like, if you want to get through to these people amid all of the AI slop, all of the ads, all of the content they're seeing all the time, you still need to make them feel something. And I think something that not a lot of people talk about is that even those of us who work in B2B marketing, if you don't have any fun with your work, what is there to keep you going? If all you have to do is write boring white papers and case studies and just feel very kind of robotic all the time, there's only so much that you can do before you just lose the will to carry on. So I think even for us, we need to find some joy in the work that we do. Yeah. So that's kind of that's my manifesto when it comes to making B2B marketing fun.
Love it. Especially, do you focus on LinkedIn or do you do other platforms as well?
Focus. It's my niche that I've found. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So same thing here. This is what I talk about on the podcast. And I think especially with LinkedIn, I think there's a lot of, if you expand that, like why people don't want to have fun on it, like this is not Instagram, or you'll get like, there's a lot of fear I hear from my clients who are like, but I have so many, think of all the peers and connections they have on LinkedIn. So because of that as well, I think LinkedIn tends to avoid anything that is too risky. Some people tend to avoid that, and therefore they don't have as much fun with it. So I think LinkedIn also just tends to be one of the social platforms that is the most boring for some people. So you found a way to lighten it up a little bit, especially on LinkedIn. So that's what I'm excited to, hear about how you've done that, but also you have the numbers to prove that like this stuff works. This stuff works. So let's talk about carousels, which is the topic of the day. I was mentioning at the beginning that carousels are a popular content type, but they're harder to do. They're harder to do right. And I mean, I've been working in this space for a while, and you want to invest the time and make sure you're creating something that is worthwhile, that's going to perform better than a text post. So what would you say, what makes some piece of content worth being a carousel? If you were to say like this idea is worthy of putting it into a carousel format.
I think a lot of people find carousels very daunting. I think because there's like a blank canvas to work with, and you have to design something and you have to figure out a layout, and it feels very daunting, but really it's pretty simple when you bring it back to kind of the essence of what a carousel needs to be. I always think of carousels as like the perfect format for when you want to express like a fully formed idea, or if you want to express a story, or maybe you want to follow a thought, but in a way that's more easily referenced. So you could do the same thing with a video. It's a great way to kind of tell a story or express what you're thinking about something, or how you're feeling, or an experience that you had. But it's much harder for people to then go back and find that one moment in a video that they really liked. They're not going to sit there and kind of scroll through the video again and again. Whereas a carousel, that's something that you can save and you can easily go back and reference it. It's highly savable, it's highly shareable. It's just easier for people to kind of refer back to. It's a great way to share frameworks or examples or visual, things to come back to. So I think that's kind of how I differentiate what makes a really good carousel and what might work better as a video or as kind of a text-only post or whatever. And I think carousels also, they work really well for visual concepts. So if you want to go through and share some kind of screenshots of great examples of content, or if you're telling like a visual story, it gives you so much more space to work with within the feed. Whereas if you just have like one image to tell one story, it's much harder to do so. And I think I also really love carousels for kind of the more storytelling element of like adding that suspense. I don't know if you know Surreal on LinkedIn. They're like a cereal company that are known for having like quite a quirky, crazy personality. And if you look at their carousels, it's literally just like plain, colorful background text, but there's like maybe one line of text on each page, and it can go on for like 70 slides, and it's just them being really funny and weird, but you keep reading because you can't stop, because the suspense is like, where is this going? I have no idea. Before you know it, you've read 70 slides and learned nothing, but it's entertaining and it keeps you there and it makes you want to come back for more. I think there's so much you can do with carousels, but most of the time it's being able to kind of make better use of that space to express something more fully, to take people on a journey, which is so much harder to do with just like a single image and a caption,
Yeah. So like, I don't know if it's because I don't do as many carousels, but I would say text posts for my clients still tend to be like the all-time high performers in terms of like impressions. And I think those, maybe they travel further because there's more of them, so you get more like outliers. I don't know. But like, have you seen, in terms of like the formats that you do, have carousels been your highest performing format?
I think in my time working with clients, I've only written maybe 4 text-only posts. I think maybe it's because carousels is my thing and people come to me because they want to do carousels. But whenever we've tried text-only, or we've tried an image or a video, it's always the carousels that do better. Maybe that's just because I love them and I'm better at making them. Who knows? But I think people are really
exactly. That's why I wanted to talk to
the
you.
Carousels at the moment. I think they have a lot of potential. So they just seem to be really taking off.
Yeah. So I told you I'd love to look at some examples. You mentioned cereal. I don't know if that's one example you want to show, but like, I would love to start digging into some, since this is a visual format, let's start talking about them. Do you want to start with cereal or something
else saved, actually? That's a bit more B2B vibes that I can share with you.
Yeah. Okay. Basically, I think with this podcast, it's great for folks to see this in action and see what we're talking about. So I would love for you to share something that could be something you've worked on, or could be someone else's, and really just show like why it worked. And then we could just really go, through the carousel together and explain some of the features, so that we could then, towards the end of this, kind of put everything back together and say, these are some of the principles that other people can apply.
I have
an
example that I worked on with a client, and then I have an example of like a brand that I really love who do carousels really well. So I got 2 to show you.
Awesome.
Amazing.
That'll be
a great
and
show it that way, or do you want me to send you the link? Okay.
Yes, please go ahead and share, because and then anyway, I'll edit in a way that it'll look good.
I've never used Riverside before, so give me a second to figure out how. Share screen.
Close to the leave button. Just don't click the leave button.
Okay. So I think you should be able to see that. Can you see LinkedIn? Okay, so this is a
Yes, here we
post I
go.
worked on with SEMrush, who make great use of carousels. They're one of my favorite brands to work with because they always have so much, they give me so much freedom to do fun things with carousels. But this was one that we worked on that was based on kind of a real case study, a real experiment they'd been running internally. And I think the reason this really works is because usually SEMrush, their vibe is more so talking about kind of things going on in the industry, what it's like being a marketer. But this kind of gave their audience like an inside look in what was going on behind the scenes. So they were talking about, when we first asked ChatGPT about AI tools, they didn't even mention us. And SEMrush is known for SEO. They're known for getting companies seen online. And they said we weren't even getting ourselves seen online. So I think this was like a really compelling hook for the audience. It was quite an honest hook, and I think it really worked. And then in the carousel, and then in the carousel, it goes through and it tells the full story. This is what we discovered. This is how we fixed it. They walk through kind of showing the results and all of the numbers. And I think it was a really interesting carousel for people who weren't used to seeing this kind of thing from SEMrush. And it showed real examples. And then it showed also, this is how we did it. This is what you can do if you have the same problem. And it's one of the best performing that we've worked on together. And ever since, we've been kind of following this format of kind of showing an experiment or an internal test and being super honest about, this is the problem we have and this is what we're doing to fix it, and here's how you can do it too. So I've always loved this example, and I've always come back to it and showed it to other clients and other people who want kind of examples of how B2B brands can do something really interesting with a carousel. So it's always been one of my favorites.
I have one comment and one question. So speaking of the content, you've just described the content format of sort of sharing, I don't know if you want to call it an experiment, sharing something internal, like behind the scenes, that type I've also seen working with my clients in text format. So what's interesting is what you just said is like, maybe it's, format is one thing, but like good content is the other piece, right? You can't just shove anything into a carousel and expect it to perform. These are like things that people want to know about. They're behind the scenes. They're specific to you or your brand. Like if you have an internal experiment, no one else can talk about that, or data no one else can talk about. So that's really interesting, is like the content first. That needs to be great. And then the question I have is, I noticed this is square, is a square format. Is that right? Like, do you have a preference on square versus 4x5?
Yeah, I usually stick to kind of the 4x5 standard. Obviously, the way that carousel show up on LinkedIn has changed recently, which I'm not a huge fan of. I hate the new design, and I hope they go back to the old one pretty soon. Oh, there's thunder and lightning here. Sorry if you heard that. That's intense. What was I talking about? Yeah, when it comes to kind of sizing, I think it tends to depend on what you want to show. I usually tend to stick to 4x5 just to kind of keep things more standard. On my content, I prefer to have like the same layout and make it very easily recognizable for people. When it comes to clients, sometimes people want to show like a full framework and it needs to be landscape, or sometimes the content works, in this case, it worked better as a square format because of just kind of what we wanted to show on screen. And sometimes you have to be a little bit flexible with the layouts that you want. I think what's more important is that everything is readable, that it grabs you in feed, and that it functions as a carousel. It's less about the dimensions, I would say. It's more about like the consistency in your goals for the content and what you can show visually on screen.
And I noticed that the carousels that you do, they look very polished. What do you actually use to create them? Like, do you use? I don't know, your tool set, basically.
Canva.
What do you use?
I do everything in Canva. I used to do Figma when I worked in-house, and I needed to do kind of like more product UI screenshots and all that kind of thing. But I find Canva has everything that I need. They're always adding cool new features. Just makes it easier to do edits, share with clients. They can leave comments directly, and it's just a bit more accessible for someone who's making like 10 carousels a week. I just need everything simple, like in one place. So Canva is the only tool I really use.
I love that. So this is very doable. It's very accessible to people. You don't have to be a designer per se, but I think, like, do you think design plays a role? Like, because you mentioned this is a slightly harder format. People can feel overwhelmed. Like, what is your background in relation to design, and like, how big of a role do you think does design play
Yeah,
in
it's funny.
creating a
Design
successful
is the
carousel?
thing that pops up the most that really scares people when it comes to carousels. Or it's the thing that people find tends to be the biggest roadblock. I'm not a trained designer. I'm someone who kind of likes design, and I have maybe an instinct of what looks good and what feels right. But I don't think that carousels need to be these super complex, well put together things in order to work. If you look at most of my carousels, they're very simple. I have the same layout every time, same colors, same fonts. It's usually just kind of like the imagery that changes, and maybe the layout will kind of slightly adapt.
Yeah.
But most of the time, it's pretty much copy and paste. You can look through my feed; they're all the same. And I think that's important. I think a lot of people feel like you have to do something different every time, and we have to kind of do an entirely new design for each concept. But I would actually keep it really simple. Having that same format each time means that when people are scrolling through their feed, they're gonna tune back in. They're gonna go, oh, I know this. I know this person. I know this brand. I'm plugged back in, ready for my favorite TV show. I'm plugged in and I'm ready to go. Whereas if it's a different
Yeah.
design, if it's a different color, if it's a different thing every time, it's not as recognizable. People are more likely to scroll past. So I think having something repeatable is really important. And then
Absolutely.
simplicity works best, in my opinion. I've tested lots of different carousels with clients and trying to bring in imagery and different layouts and all this. And we always find that the simple is best. Just a very bold, striking headline, an image that really adds that context, adds that visual cue. Maybe a subtitle if needed, but I think simple always works best. What you want is to let the hook work for itself most of the time. And, having that white space and that leaving space for the content that you've written and that you've showed to breathe is very important. So if people are feeling overwhelmed when it comes to carousels, I would always say just keep it as simple as possible and add embellishments as you go and you feel more comfortable. But it really doesn't have to be like the most amazing design you've ever seen to work.
This is interesting because if you think about the formats that exist, I recently talked to Vince Pieri.
Yes.
He's known for doing infographics on LinkedIn. And the opposite is true for an infographic. You want to make it really dense. And in one image, you want to shove as much information as you can, make people want to save it. So I think, there's different places and different times for different formats, but I think it's interesting that with a carousel, you are telling a story that needs room to breathe. It's something that at least, 8, I don't know if you have a minimum, but like 6 to 10 slides, you need that space. So I think maybe it's more of a beginner friendly format than something like an infographic. If you watch my previous episode and you were scared away.
Really difficult. Yes.
To do them well.
Vince Pieri's from Fletch, right? I love their infographics. I think I've saved like 1 million of them. Yes,
I think
Anthony
his brother
Pieri.
is.
Yes.
Anthony, yes, yeah. And then his brother did end up doing infographics, so still in the marketing space, but just focus on infographics. So if you could check his stuff out if you're interested in learning, but I do think it's a totally different game.
Different
it really is.
It's
very
doing a completely different job,
doing a good job. So
it requires a very different set of skills. Whereas carousels, I would say that they're more. I think they have this reputation of being very daunting and scary, but I think they're actually pretty beginner friendly.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're making it seem like you can, don't be afraid, give it a try kind of thing.
That's my mission.
Canva,
like
okay?
everyone,
just
give it a try. It's not as hard as
blank page on
think
Canva. Yeah. So let's go ahead and look at another one. You said it was just a brand that you liked. Another good example, and we can see some more
this is one of
good
my
ones
favorites.
in action.
So Asana. Asana are a great company to follow on social, on Instagram, on LinkedIn. They do really, really fun content. I actually spoke to one of the team a couple of months ago, and we did like a bit of an interview to figure out more about their strategy. It was really interesting. But one of my favorite posts I've seen from them is that for Christmas last year, they took the example of Home Alone, which I'm sure all of us know, of the worst planning, the worst example of planning you've probably ever seen in media. And as a project management tool, they said this is how the McAllister family would have actually made their flight and not left their kid behind if they'd used Asana, which I think is just such a fun way to show off your product. And I think it was timely because it was Christmas. It's a piece of popular media that everyone knows. Everyone has seen this image of Kevin like in the mirror. So it's instantly recognizable in the feed. It grabs your attention. You're thinking, Home Alone, why am I seeing Home Alone on my LinkedIn screen? And as you go through, it's actually it's a well put together story. So they're taking an example that all of us know, and they kind of give this alternative ending of if they had used Asana and if they'd used these features, this is how it would have gone a little bit better for them. So I think this was just a really fun way to talk about the product because, most product marketing content you see on LinkedIn is fairly stale, fairly boring. Maybe it's just kind of a simple mock-up or one of those really slick animated AI videos, whereas this is like a really fun, relatable way to show off what their product does. So this is always one of my favorite examples to show too.
Could you click through some of the, let's see what, okay. I like that they even tied in their product because I think some people try to go, funny or fun, but it doesn't tie back to the product. But they've done such a good job being timely, product related, fun. Like they've kind of hit all of those different things, and also simple. Like it's only eight slides. It's not
exactly
crazy
like
long.
they
You
could
get
have
the
just
gist really
done a
quickly.
meme of
I
like
love it.
The McAllisters or something and just kept it at that. And it wouldn't have really been linked to their product at all, but it would have gotten them a lot of engagement, right? Whereas this is a great way to get that engagement, but also actually show what your product is capable of. I think it just strikes a really great balance between entertaining and fun, but also, having an impact for their company. So I love it.
Yeah. Do you have any examples of like carousels that didn't go well? Like maybe at the beginning of your time or something? Maybe you look back and be like, oh, I can see why this didn't perform that well because
I think
of X, Y, and
I've
Z.
been lucky in that, the carousels I posted early on taught me a lot about what worked and what didn't. And some of them took off immediately and some didn't. And I could just lean into what worked rather than kind of trying to beat a dead horse and keep doing the same thing. Yeah.
But that's a good point. Like you kind of just need to put stuff out there sometimes to see what works with your audience. And so not being afraid to get it perfect before you posting. So everyone
That's always my
needs to
biggest piece of advice to people who want to start is you just need to try as many different things as you can. I always say I wish I'd experimented a little bit more at the beginning, but the more you try, you don't know until you try. You need to experiment and see how it performs. But this is a carousel that I did early on. And when I say it didn't perform, it was like it didn't underperform, like it's still a decent carousel. But I think this is when I was still figuring out what my niche was. And I did one of these typical, like, if I could only use 5 tools, this is what I'd use. And I don't think it's a bad carousel in any way. I used some of the kind of techniques that I still employ now, which is bringing in a bit of humor, a bit of a meme, telling a story, like I had this thought. And then I went through and I shared some of the tools that I use and what I used them for. Not necessarily a bad carousel, it's designed okay, it worked. But I think I stopped doing this kind of content because I realized, what is this actually giving to my audience? What is this helping them do? If my goal is to kind of provide ideas for content, and if it's for, targeting B2B marketers who want to take more of a risk with content or create content that lands and that feels engaging, what is this giving them? Not much. And also, how many roundups of people's favorite tools have you seen online? Probably a lot. It's not standing out. It's not doing anything unique. And I think even like this, it's quite busy. There's lots of logos, and it's like the hook isn't super direct. It's like if I could only use 5 tools, it's like, there's nothing there to hook people in and be like, oh, this is for me. So this is probably something that I wouldn't do these days, but I posted it and it taught me that, this kind of content isn't what landed with my audience. So it was important for me to post and to learn what works and what doesn't.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to we don't have to share your screen anymore because I think you shared some really good examples. I want to kind of go to some things that I've like observed and kind of ask you more because you've talked a bit about I guess your ideation process, or like you kind of started somewhere. And so like the first ones you showed, the great examples, those were maybe more content that was more valuable to your audience. So that could be one thing. Whereas like maybe when you were in your early stages, you were just kind of testing things out. So can we go back to the beginning of sort of ideating before you even get to the carousel, and like how do you figure out the ideas that are worth, let's say, prioritizing to create a carousel for anyway? So can you just share what you do, or maybe what you do with clients? Because I think that would be helpful.
Yeah,
Since
no,
that's where you gotta start.
I think it's been 7 months now that I've been working with clients, I have realized that the carousels that perform best are always the ones that came from a real conversation or a real debate or someone leaving a comment in my comment section that annoyed me. It's always something that's kind of,
Yeah.
an organic idea that popped up as a result of a real life conversation, because those are the topics that are actually interesting. Those are the topics that people are genuinely thinking about and discussing and debating. And that's usually what grabs attention in the feed. Whenever I've had a discussion with a client and I've pushed back on something, we've had a little bit of a back and forth. I'm like, oh, this would make a great carousel, because I'm sure loads of other people are having this conversation too. So whenever I have those kind of lightning strike ideas, I'm like, oh, this would be a good one. I have like a folder that I save all of these little ideas down in, and that's like the basis of a really
I
great
love
carousel
that.
most of the time.
Yeah. So one of the best carousels I've done, and I don't do them very often. I'm going to be doing them more, though. I will, which is one of the reasons I wanted to chat with you. But thinking about where these ideas come from, I think one of my clients, I was like, send me some selfies. I'm going to help you figure out what selfies you can use to sort of make your content get, stop the scroll and all this stuff. And they just had such a hard time with understanding like what kind of selfies to take. And for me, if you're in social, you just kind of take that for granted, because you're just like, just get some selfies of you working at the computer or whatever. You've seen the ones that are on LinkedIn, because we are on LinkedIn way too much. Our clients are not, probably. So I created a carousel of how to create selfies for LinkedIn, and like what you should do, what you shouldn't do. And like, it was very helpful to my clients. So it was a question they had. I answered that. But also I just like, let me just share this carousel, on LinkedIn, and it performed really well. So I think, obviously listen to your customers. They're always right. But like those things that really come as questions that you might not have even thought is relevant because you're so inside the business that you do, pay attention to those, because that's what that goes in your ideas folder, or, it should at least be prioritized when you start to hear those questions or those things that
100%.
Yeah, you may not have thought of yourself. So you can't like brainstorm your way into the
No, it's so
content
true.
ideas. You
And
gotta listen. You've got to listen.
like the funniest example I have of this is like, I think it was last year. I was talking to my dad about how I'd like managed to make LinkedIn into my business, and he was a little bit confused about everything. And he was like, so who are you talking to? And I was like, B2B marketers. And he was like, what on earth is B2B? What does that mean? And it kind of just pulled me out of it. I'm like, oh, there's people out there that have no idea what I do or what we talk about, but for us, it's everything. And I ended up making a carousel where it was me sending my dad like B2B buzzwords and things that we talk about all the time, and he had to guess what it meant. And it went viral. People loved it. People were obsessed with it. I love that. And found it so funny. So that's another example of a way to use carousels.
Love that. I mean,
oh, wow.
So I live in Taiwan, and long story. That's a long story. But I live in Taiwan, and LinkedIn is not a thing. And it's not because it's not even a language thing. It's not because of the language. Just the market here finding jobs is very different. So people don't really need LinkedIn in the ways that, a lot of the rest of the world does. So when I say, I live here, and I'm like, oh, what do you do? LinkedIn, they don't even, like, I have to explain what is LinkedIn. And that's even harder. And they're like, I'm like, it's kind of like Facebook and kind of like Instagram. And like, yeah, I sometimes have to do that. Yeah. And I'm just like, here, I'll just show you. But I definitely get that. Yeah. So thinking back to the things that you shared with me, would you say that are there patterns or like things like you can say, what makes a great carousel, or like, you've decided, you really want to give it a go, things you must keep in mind when you're, in order to make one that will get seen as much as possible and will get those numbers.
Yeah, I think usually there's like a few elements that are really important to creating a really interesting carousel, but also a carousel that performs as well. And I think, like I mentioned earlier, probably the most important element is the hook. It doesn't matter how great the content you have inside is if people just scroll past because it didn't grab their attention. So I think having a really strong hook that not only grabs attention, but also actually is direct. I think a lot of people kind of fall into the trap of like creating a hook that has a lot of mystery. It's like, oh, I had this problem, or this happened to me, and just not really being upfront about what the carousel is about. A lot of people, it's like a split-second decision as they're scrolling through their feed, that how many carousels popped up as they scroll, probably like 10. When they're scrolling past it, it's like you have a second to convince them. And if you're not giving them enough, they're not going to stop to find out. So I find that hooks that are very clear and direct, like this is what this carousel is about, but also done in a bold and attention-grabbing way, that's kind of the sweet spot. And then also, I think something else that kind of stops the scroll is the visuals. A lot of people will overlook the visuals or like the imagery, but that's a really important visual cue for your audience. So maybe if someone's scrolling really fast, they might not grab the text, but if there's a big, bold image, that might stop them and make them read and think, oh, actually, yeah, I do want to scroll through this. So don't underestimate imagery either. And then I think the most important thing for me in terms of not grabbing attention, but maintaining the attention is, like I said, it's having a narrative, having a clear story. When it comes to a carousel, if you kind of click through and people are going off in 5 different tangents and it feels like you don't really know where this is going or feels a bit scattered, it's easy to just scroll past and think, oh, I don't have the time or the energy to figure out what this is about. So you need to make it really easy. You need to guide people through like you're on a tour. And make it really simple for them. So I think having a really good structure, usually most of my carousels have a similar structure. You have the hook, then you have like maybe a bit of a intro, a bit of context setting, and then you go into kind of like a list of examples or a list of tips or like, you know, telling the full story. So, and then having like the end, like the CTA slide at the end. Kind of trying to keep, it's like you're telling a story. You need a beginning, middle, and end, and it needs to kind of have a narrative flow. Otherwise, all of that work that you did with the hook to kind of bring people in, it's going to go to waste because they're going to give up and just scroll past. So I would say those are kind of the main elements that I would really focus on.
So in addition to carousels, like specifically, I'd like to ask you a few general questions. Just, you know, as you work with clients, what are some of the obstacles that you work with them on to overcome in order to just even be posting on social? Because I think I also face a lot of those challenges. I don't do coaching directly. I do like done for you and sort of positioning and larger marketing strategy. But I feel that there are some obstacles that people have. And so I'm wondering if you experience those too with your clients, like, again, like fear of being judged, so they don't want to post certain things, or fear of saying the right thing, or those kinds of things. Does that come up? And like, how do you deal with that?
Honestly, I'm very lucky in that the clients that I work with are very bought in to LinkedIn and the power of LinkedIn and what it has to offer. And most of them work in marketing, or they've been creators themselves, or they get it. So I don't have to do a lot of work to convince them to try something. Oftentimes, the barriers are time. Most of the people I work with, they're founders, they're running businesses, they're really busy people. And if I'm creating content for their like founder page, it's having like the time to sit them down and ask them questions. How are you feeling? What do you think about this? What ideas came up for you this week? What conversations happened with your clients that could turn into an interesting post? Because I am not that person. I have my ideas of what would work really well, but as you probably know, like when it comes to founder and personal brand content, like your own thoughts and your own experiences are what make the best content. So oftentimes it's like finding a way to tap into their brain and find time to sit them down and talk to them. Or if not, I've found the best way that we can get around it is I say to them, like, send me everything you have. Doesn't have to be neat or tidy or organized. If you have a random idea as you're walking down the street, send me a voice note. If you had like an internal workshop that you think like I might find interesting or be able to pull something out of, send me the slides, send me anything. And I'm like kind of like a funnel and I'll turn it into something that could make good content. So learning how to work with busy people doing lots of things has been challenging because, I came from an in-house background where I was in the company and I lived and breathed the brand and I knew everything that was going on. And I could just go and talk to someone if I needed like help with something or if I needed to ask a question. Whereas working remotely with people that are all doing different things and running businesses, it's like that's usually the challenge for me, is being able to tap into their brains and get those fresh ideas all the time.
Yeah. Well, I will be curious if you ever do encounter that, because I work with founders and marketers too, but I feel like because this is very personal, as I mentioned, like this is usually your brand. So I'm not talking about the people who are behind the brand. I'm talking about the people whose personal brand is posting. Usually, like as the strategist, you're like, hey, I want to post this. But usually the thing that you want to post the most could be a vulnerable thing. It could be something that I don't want to say makes them look bad, but it's not maybe the thing that makes them look great because they're talking about like a challenge or a mistake or something. So those are some of the things that I've encountered, and I think it's interesting because you kind of need you have to trust each other, and you have to be willing to grow and to be seen, because the whole point of LinkedIn is like you want to be seen, and so some of your most vulnerable things could go viral, and that means a lot of people could see those ideas and those stories. So those are some of the things I was referring to, maybe as you have, in your journey, if you ever faced
No,
those.
I honestly, I think
Here.
that the founders I've worked with have been super open to be experimental and to try new things.
Well, that's
And
awesome.
no,
They don't take it as personally, like they see it as like
exactly.
a
And I think
persona.
also
Yeah.
maybe like my own personal
Okay.
style of LinkedIn is I don't really share a lot about my personal life, or I don't really open up too much when it
Okay.
comes to, things happening. And I tend to I still tap into those emotions, but it's mainly more about the work. And same with the clients that I work with. It's the most vulnerable I get is
Yeah.
about expressing like things that are frustrating me, or, what it's like transitioning into freelance work. And the same with my clients. What is it like growing a business, and what have you kind of really struggled with?
Yeah.
And I've been very lucky that, most of the clients I've worked with have been people who found me through LinkedIn or at an event, or, people who I know. And so I've been very lucky that the people I've worked with are kind of very of
Yeah.
the same mindset, and I don't have to convince them to do something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I know
that's
how lucky I
awesome.
am.
I
Yeah.
do. I mean, I definitely agree with you. Like getting buy-in. Well, anyway, they shouldn't. If they don't buy in, they shouldn't be working with
Yeah.
you anyway. Like if it's an uphill battle, I guess. But I guess I'm just touching into the thing that this is very personal work. In a way that if it is a B2B brand, I think it can be less personalized. But because personal brands are there, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's like there's a line for some people, and like you don't share about your personal life, and that's. I don't think that it matters actually in terms of the things that perform well. I think you can be very business focused, right? But I think, everyone has a different line. Some people love to share about their kids online. Some people don't. Like, yeah, everyone has a different line. And I think just figure out what works to you. So when someone asked me recently, should I do anything, should I say something outrageous just to go viral, right? A founder was asking me. And I was like, if it's not, I mean, first of all, if it's not related to your product in any way, that's not going to help you if you just say something ridiculous. And I would say, honestly, it also has to be based on something that you believe a little bit. Like it has to be sort of true. Or you can't maintain that facade for very long. So I think that's some of the deeper work, I think, of this stuff. We're talking about carousels, and those are a little bit more tactical things, but some of the more strategic things, they have to be authentic to you. It has to be, specific enough to your business that there's some correlation. So yeah, I think this work is very interesting because there's tactical stuff, which you need, but you also need the strategy. You need both pieces to make it
Something
work,
that
to
has
make it
been
successful.
interesting for me,
So yeah,
sorry, were you about to
go
go
ahead.
somewhere else?
Oh, no, I just
Yeah,
wanted to
no,
make sure
I
you had
think
space
it's
to
interesting what you
share.
say about like wanting to kind of almost rage bait to go viral, or like I've had a few conversations with people who kind of felt that pressure that if they weren't going viral, then the strategy wasn't working, or feeling as if like they had to do these
Yeah.
things they weren't super comfortable doing, didn't come naturally to them, but if they wanted to go viral, then maybe they'd have to. I think it's been interesting like having these conversations with clients and realizing that actually virality isn't really what they want. Sure, you could have a post go super viral on LinkedIn, get loads of likes and loads of comments, but would any of those people turn into clients? Probably not. And we always we try and find this balance of what I call like the thin content and the thick content. So the thin content is like the memes, the kind of the more relatable, highly shareable stuff that tends to go more viral. It's a bit lighter, and
That is the social stuff. Like if it's just a
exactly,
selfie, like I went on
like it's like
vacation
it
last
casts
week,
a
like that
wide
kind of
net
stuff.
and it brings in lots of people.
Yeah.
But it's the thicker content that is more specific to your niche, that's actually highly valuable and savable, and that convinces people that, oh, actually this might be a company that I want to work with. That's the kind of stuff that's thicker, and it might not bring as many people in, but it will keep more people. It'll help you find the right people. So we try and find a balance between those two.
I think it's a great way.
Yeah,
It's like a portfolio. You kind of need the occasional meme just to be light and get lots of
exactly.
visibility, but you also need the real stuff. And so, yeah, I like to tell people the same thing. Like it's not like you're only aiming for one. You need a portfolio, you need carousels and
Yeah,
infographics and text posts. And I think you need all of them. You figure out what works for you, and then you keep doing those things that work for you. And I can tell you, working with different clients, it's not the same formula
absolutely
that works
not.
for A that works for B. It just isn't. And it's very, you try and experiment, and then,
Exactly.
just follow what works. So Well, Amy, this has been so much fun. I learned a lot. I'm excited to continue following you on LinkedIn. So I've been following you for a while and finally got a chance to hear from you. Is there any like final thought you have about carousels, LinkedIn, marketing,
Ooh,
or
good
anything you'd
question.
like to share?
I think I have just reading my notes of what I wrote down. I think if you're someone who maybe is in B2B or in any industry and you're thinking you want to start carousels, I think a lot of people make the mistake when it comes to carousels of thinking about what they want to say as opposed to what their audience wants to read. So I think, instead of looking at it and like, oh, we have this product launch and so we need to do a carousel, let's make it about this. That's not likely to perform because you're not thinking about what does my audience actually want to consume, what's going to entertain them, what's going to interest them, what's going to make them care. And I think as soon as you make that kind of switch in your mind is usually when the carousels start becoming actually good content that people are interested in and want to read. So that's always kind of my biggest piece of advice. And then the other one that I have was if your carousel starts with 3 ways to do X, scrap it and start again. Do something else. Just don't do it.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think, that's all I have. And also, I think just think about when it comes to CTAs, and I think a lot of people in B2B especially feel the need to always make the CTA, book a demo, come to our website, do this, we need this. That's not what a carousel should do. The point of a carousel isn't to funnel people into your, lead magnet system. The point of a carousel is to entertain, to inform, to educate, to inspire. The whole point is that it should be a fully formed thing within that carousel. It should be the full experience. If you need to ship someone off somewhere else to read the rest of it, they're not going to go. So always think about like the full experience of a carousel and what people are going to gain from that, just from reading it. Those are the carousels that always kind of stick in my mind, and they're the ones that tend to perform best.
Absolutely. Like the content itself, it should be all there. Like the whole message, the whole story. Yeah, I agree. No matter, even if it's a text post or an infographic, I think the same applies. The content itself should have. And I wouldn't necessarily say one message, but I kind of think about like that. You should be able to say in a sentence, like, what is this about? And I think sometimes that helps when you're stuck on any format of content. Sometimes you feel stuck. You're like, can I even say what this is about? If you can't do that, that's kind of shows you might have some more work
exactly.
to do
Or even what's the purpose? What's the point of this? Is it to teach someone something? Is it to give them an idea? Is it to make them feel seen? If you don't have that kind of end goal in mind, then that's when you tend to kind of lose direction of where you're going. So I think always having that in mind of what can someone gain from reading this?
Exactly. With your audience in mind. Yes. So again, we'll leave on that note. Yes, always think of your audience first, customer first. Yes. Or just go ask them or listen to your calls. I use Granola. There's lots of other like meeting note kind of recorders, but like, go back through that and just start mining through some of the things you've said. And that's probably where the best content ideas are.
Thanks so much.
All right, Amy, take care. Thank you so much.